reassembly time. Okay, so before starting with the actual reassembly, a quick word on the order of reassembly. This is the shutter crate. Obviously, shutter curtains will go in here. Before placing the shutter curtains, I will have to replace the gear that was here. So that should be this one. It goes groove down, so like this, and it's kept in place by a little pin, this one, and it also had a washer, this thicker one, that was on top of it. So the washer was, or actually was it on the bottom? I'll have to check the video. It might have been on the bottom. My common sense tells me that it should have had two washers, but for sure there was only one. Okay, so that's the first component to be replaced. Then we will need to replace that bit. So this bit, along with the second brake and the little spring. And the reason is that this one should sit here like this. So it's kept in place by two screws that are placed from below, and one more screw, this one, that goes from the top, and it's one of the two screws that also keep this in place. Okay, but these are the holes for the two screws from below. Okay, when this is put back in position like so ish, come on, okay, like so, it partially covers the head of the screws, so you will have no chance of putting the screws back. One thing that I did at some point on one camera was to actually cut two grooves in the shutter crate. I marked the position of the screws and I simply used the Dremel tool to cut two grooves according to the position, so that I could slide the screws in and out with the shutter crate in place. And that turned to be quite useful, because this little bugger can be quite a lot of pain in the ass. Not the actual mounting, because this is the easy part, but you would need to replace this little spring that is not kept in place by anything, so it's simply caught in between this piece and the plate. Okay, so when putting this in place, you'd have to turn it upside down or turn this upside down. It's quite fiddly. Another way of doing it is putting this in place first and then trying to get this inside through this little hole. This is doable as well. And word of advice, if you look at the spring, it has a shorter end and a longer end. The longer end is what pushes this cam outwards or towards the shaft of the shutter, and if the position of this spring is all the way in, that's completely okay. But if it slides outwards, it will in fact get caught in this area of the rangefinder assembly, and you might end up with a non-functional long shutter speeds. It could either get locked, get the second curtain locked on open, so act like a B mode, or it could actually jam, because this end, the end of the spring, could either get stuck in this position, in which case the little cam is always pushed aside, or and it won't be able to return because it will try to push this spring aside, but the spring will be blocked in place by the edge of the rangefinder assembly. I don't know if this makes sense, but once everything is put in place, it's quite obvious. The other possibility is that it gets caught behind the rangefinder assembly, so in this position, in which case this this little cam will not be pushed back, so it will be always retracted. And if this is the case, so when this happens, all longer speeds will act like something like 1/30 or something. So the escapement will buzz, it will work, but the second curtain will start moving a lot sooner. Okay, so this is one piece that needs to go before the shutter, and the other assembly that should be put back before the shutter crate and the shutter is the entire advance mechanism, because once this is in place with everything that it contains, meaning the sprockets and shutter button and so on, you will no longer have access to these screws, or you will have a very, very difficult access. So this must go first or second. All right. Everything else I think can be replaced afterwards, including the self-timer that in this particular case will not be mounted on this camera. It will go on the other camera, and this one will probably be self-timerless. This one goes here. So this one goes here, and this bracket must come on top of the crate, so in front of the crate, and it's held in place by 1, 2, 3 screws. Therefore, you can get it in and take it out, even with all these other pieces in place. This cam will slide behind the sprockets. So this one can be installed afterwards. These are all parts that need to be installed afterwards. This needs to be put back because it is the gear that connects to the sprockets, so to the advance mechanism, and it must be installed at the same time with the shutter. So we have this one, we have this one, and this one. This one, of course, springs of the shutter, and that's pretty much it. Everything else can be installed afterwards. And I usually take the camera to this stage where I can test the shutter, try to test and adjust the shutter, and only afterwards I'll be back to replace other parts. So in case anything goes wrong, I can still easily manage to take it apart again and try to fix whatever went wrong. Alright, I'll get ready and I'll start. A couple more little things, so I won't stop in the middle of the process. Regarding the reinstalling of the curtains themselves, what I am doing now, at least in my first attempts, I tried different methods, but this one seems to be working the best. Let's assume these are already assembled. I will just place each shutter roller with, of course, the rollers, the drums, the curtains, these rollers, the bushing, whatever needs to go back in here. I'll put them in place, put the nuts back, so the locking nuts, tighten them enough to keep these shafts still so they won't wiggle around, and add some tension to the curtains. It doesn't matter how much, just enough to get the curtains moving. If they are wobbly, most likely the ribbons will get displaced from these little rollers. So imagine that the ribbons of the ribbons of the second curtain need to go under this roller and on this bigger roller. So if this roller has no tension, that ribbon will simply flop around and get displaced, so it will jump from this, and that is not good. I mean, it gets in the way really bad. So I just add tension to keep everything a bit tight, just a bit tight, so I can work more easily. Of course, the main drum can be fixed in place by adding this, which I think it's some kind of a brake. Maybe if I don't forget, I'll give my opinion on this. I'm not totally sure if it's a brake or not. Even if it is, I think it's very poorly designed, but that doesn't matter. So main drum goes in here, that thing on the bottom, so it won't fall off. And a thing to notice is that the main drum, oh, I need to re-glue these ribbons before they undo themselves. This roller has a gear attached to it. The gear has a groove. That groove will allow the gear to rotate from one end of the groove till the other end of the groove, locked by this little pin. So it actually rotates around a shaft that's here, and this is the limiter pin that it will only allow it to rotate clockwise or counterclockwise from here to here. So it really doesn't matter how you put the drum back, as long as once put in place, you can turn it counterclockwise and see the first curtain move, the first curtain move from this part of the film gate towards this part of the film gate. If you somehow replace it and let's say when trying to twist it counterclockwise, the first curtain moves from here to here and it stops, it means you have to take it slightly out, rotate it a little bit more, put it back in, and then try. And you'll see that it will always go from this point to this point, and pretty much always from a fixed point here to a fixed point here. There can be no error because it's physically limited. The position of the curtain on one side or the other can be only adjusted by adjusting the actual insertion points of the ribbons on each curtain, depending on which one needs to be moved. So there is no way to adjust the timing in the same way that you could do in a FED 2, because the FED 2 has the limiting gear here, not on the drum itself. So by taking it out, rotating it by one tooth in either direction, you would actually allow the drum assembly to move, to rotate more or less. So in fact allowing or determining the end of the of the curtains to stop further or sooner in regard to, let's say, one of the edges of the film gate. It might sound complicated, it's really not. It's quite easy, but you need to have it in front of you to better understand what I'm talking about. Or maybe I should try to explain it differently or with a better language. Alright, so this is the way I am putting back the shutter curtains. What else should I mention now? Oh yeah, a quick word on lubrication. The lubrication part is something I don't really feel I have it right. I don't know what is right and what is not. Nobody's really having a definitive answer, I suppose. So this is how I do it as of right now. I will for sure change my approach in the future as I discover new things, but right now I am using for these, so for the springs, I am using this is graphite oil, and I will replace this graphite oil with Nye oil when it will finally arrive. Nye oil is apparently extremely respected, everybody is recommending it. For the time being, graphite oil is all I've got, except for this guy, and I think it's more than adequate for this job. So I will use it on these springs to have them lubricated, not dripping, but to be quite soaked. I'm not yet sure what is the correct amount, because at first I used to very lightly lubricate them, and I had shutters that began to squeak, sign of under lubrication. So now I'm using a bit more on the areas where I have two metal parts that will rub against each other, so like this one. So on this little gap between the two, I will use the same graphite oil, but is diluted in lighter fluid, 1+10. So 1 milliliter of oil in 10, in my case, of lighter fluid, and you see after a while the lighter fluid evaporates even with the cap on. Alright, then and I'll use that for anything that needs to move fast, and like bearings. It doesn't have real bearings, but if it did, I'd use that. For the slow moving parts, so advanced mechanism, gears in the advanced mechanism, these little pins and this spring and this button and this one not really, because the film will go around here, and this one has an opening, and I don't want any grease to get out and touch the film. But everything else, this little guy may be just a bit on the outside. Everything will be greased with a combination of this. This is it's called butter, and it's a Teflon grease, quite thick, so it's on the heavy side, and it's used for telescope mounts. I'm not really sure what that means, but I suppose it's some kind of ball joint used in telescopes that needs to move very smoothly, I suppose, and it will dampen the roughness given by the lack of precision in these gears. This is one option. The other option is this. This is standard grease with molybdenum in it. So molybdenum disulfide or moly grease. And it comes in big tubes, 400 grams, so you could use it for like 2 lifetimes probably. It's a lot thinner than the telescope grease. I try not to mix and match. I don't know if anything happens. They are two completely different types of grease, I think. So this is moly grease, that one is Teflon. I don't know how they react when mixed. Probably nothing will happen. I actually don't know. You could also use lithium grease, so white grease. It probably doesn't really matter. Anyway, it will be a lot better than what they used. But I prefer to use the thicker ones, so the advance feels smoother, because once everything is in place, shutter curtains, light seals and other things, you will see how everything tends to get grainier, like there's, I don't know, sand in the mechanism, and it's not. Everything has been cleaned, but the way these metal edges rub against this also gives a weird friction feeling. I don't know how to describe it. It's not as smooth as other cameras. It will be a lot smoother than it was when I started to disassemble it, but it will have its limits. Okay, so that's about it about lubrication, I think. Of course, all escapements very sparingly lubricated here. Okay, I used Moebius diluted in naphtha. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 points or something like that, and maybe I will need to add some in between these two, so in between the plate and the two rings, but this one is not a fast moving part, so as long as it's clean it will work just fine. Alright. Okay, first issue. I got it all back together up until this stage. But there is one issue, and it's not a small one. So this is the shutter uncocked. This is the shutter cocked. And this is how it would look when the long speeds are used. So let's say half a second. During that half a second, the second curtain will stay here. So it is going to be visible inside the frame. I'll see if I can do anything about it without adjusting the position of the curtains. The idea is that the system uses two latches or two brakes. This is the main one that will latch the second curtain on all speeds. Okay, so this is the regular B mode. If I release the shutter, the second curtain will stop here. It's literally touching the film gate. When the long speeds are involved, when releasing the shutter button, so when depressing the shutter button, the first curtain starts moving, the tripper hits the brake moves aside, just a second, and then the second curtain will be stopped and held in place by the second brake that will be retracted after a predefined period of time, so half a second, 1 second, quarter, eighth or 15th of a second. It will be retracted, allowing the second curtain to continue its travel. But because they are two distinct brakes, so this one and this one, there will be some offset between them. So the main brake, the main latch catches this piece right here. So the very tip will be stopped by this cutout. When this moves aside, the second brake or latch will catch this piece by this little cutout, this little prong. And if you, I don't know if it's visible in the video, but between this position, that is the position of the second curtain stopped by this latch, and this other latch, there is a gap of about 0.5 millimeter. That 0.5 millimeter translates in this motion of the second curtain. So if I release this brake now, this is how much it will move. I did see this when I started this assembly, but I thought it was part of the camera being all messed up and all locked by the old grease. Now this latch has a wobbliness in it, so it can move like this, and I don't think there's anything I can do about it. If I tighten these two screws, the wobbliness decreased. But if you over tighten these, so these two screws go through the cutouts in this latch. So effectively, if they go through the cutouts, they will not allow the latch to slide, to move aside. it will only allow they will only allow it to move like this, so inwards and outwards. But if you tighten them too much, they will hit the plate and push against the plate, and in effect they will lift this side of this piece. So this side will go up and there will be more room to wiggle like this, so in a vertical way for this little piece. If it goes up, it is very possible for this to slip beneath it. I don't know if it's something I can reproduce, but I did have to fix such an issue. So I'm lifting it up now. Ah, it didn't slide. Okay, well, in this case, let's see. It's still here. The only fix for this problem is the repositioning of the curtains, and that is not something I wanted to do. I also need to check for straightness of the curtains, and right now they don't really look straight. This one is very skewed. The other one is less. And well, funny enough, the gap is almost perfect between them, so they are evenly skewed. That means I could just leave them be. But this I don't like. If I decide to keep the camera for myself, I can live with that, because it will only affect the longer speeds that I don't use anyway, and I would only lose I would lose about 1 millimeter of the frame. And this piece seems a bit rounded, so the corner is a bit rounded, and that means it would allow this one to move even further, but there's nothing I can do about that. I have no other replacement to use, so in any case, the second curtain should have been a lot further back, so it should have been something like this, a good millimeter behind the film gate. Also, the first curtain should have been less tucked away beyond the film gate. Right now it has about 3 millimeters, if not more, and it should have had less. It's not good. It's not good. I can't only move one. If I move just the second curtain, the slit gets wider, so it will have no chance of getting correct high speeds. So if I move one, I need to move the other as well. I'll think about it, because that was not the plan. I really didn't want to replace or mess around with the curtains on this one, but Yeah, maybe I'll have to. See, on this one, the second curtain is slightly visible when it's uncocked. But nothing is visible when shot on B, and the edge of the curtain is roughly behind behind the film gate. Also, they seem quite parallel with the film gate. This is also an original shutter. I think I'll move along, get the shutter stack on, so these pieces and this one, because it won't work without it. I mean, it could work if I get that little latch out of the way, and to get that out of the way I only need to unscrew one of these screws and swivel it. But then I would only be able to test the shorter speeds. That should be enough in theory. Okay, so we have this one, and it should look something like this. My plan is to get it in a working state so I can test the speeds. And depending on how well I can adjust the shutter, I will decide whether to leave it as such or mess around with it. I guess this is a fair example of quality control issues. Okay, this is now set on B. The little spring. As for tensioning, I was going to talk about it anyway. There is nothing As for tensioning the shutter, I couldn't find anything online specifically for these cameras, for Soviet cameras in general, so I have no idea how many turns you need to tension the curtains as a recommendation given by the factory. So, okay, some issues with the phone, anyway, still there. So, we've got these on, and now I'll need to get, come on, get out of here. I need to get this one on. Okay. So, without the slow speed escapement on, this latch is always stopping the second curtain, and this is the width of the gap or the slit for various speeds. This is 1/25th, this is 250, this is 500, and this is 1000. And this one I think should be 1 millimeter. Yeah, it's 1 millimeter. So the the slit size is correct. Okay, and this one, okay. I got it almost right. It's just a bit rotated that way, so I think it's off by 2 or 3 teeth at most. So loosen this one. And then it should be, when this is set to 1/60th, no, 1/25th, which is the first cutout, the first slit or notch in this disc that goes all the way through. So the slow speeds are only partially cut. 1/25 is the first that goes from top to bottom. So when the selector is on that notch, this pin should be just slightly to the right of it, or to the right of this prong. Okay, now keep it in place and get this back tighten. Too close, too close. If it's too close, when you lift the selector to change the gears, not the gears, the shutter speeds, that prong will hit the pin. Come on. So now I have to lift and slightly twist in order for it to get past the pin, and that's not nice. It should run smoothly. So I will shift it one more tooth. It's a trial and error procedure, so you need to be patient. Okay, so now it lifts easily and it barely engages this for the 1/60th. That is my understanding, although I've read somewhere that it shouldn't engage for 1/60th. I don't know. So now it's set to 1/60th. Next notch is 1/50th, 15th. Okay, now it's 1/8. 1/4. Half, and 1 full second is here. And this is what happens. If you look at the edge, the metal edge of the second curtain here, see how it entered the frame. Okay, yeah, I'll have to decide what I'm going to do about it. Either way, next episode, I'll stop here because it's too long already. But the next episode will I'll try to cover the way I adjust the shutter in this stage, and this, the hard slit, the gap that changes size. All right, so see you next time.